Well, why don't we get started? Dulma, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. We're so excited to have you. Why don't we go in a quick round of introductions, and I can give a brief intro of what we're going to be talking about today, the topics we're going to be diving into, and then we can get started.
That sounds great.
Perfect. Dulma, you want to go first?
Yeah. So that sounds perfect. So I am a TikTok creator. I talk about direct to consumer and e-commerce brands on TikTok. I started posting last September after a couple of years of running a community of women e-commerce and D2C founders, where we would invite in guest speakers to teach tactical workshops on all things D2C and e-commerce. So I just ended up talking to hundreds of founders and experts and agency owners about best practices. And so I decided to start posting on TikTok about some of that stuff for fun. And it turns out there was an audience for it. So now I am actually more or less a full-time TikTok creator, and I also do brand consulting on the side, and I'm still running the community. So now I just get to nerd out about business all day long, which is pretty fun.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I'm Marina. I am the senior brand and community strategist here at NoGood. We lead all efforts on the TikTok side, and we have our own TikTok community team internally that we're growing inside out. And Izzy has been my partner in crime in trying to convince all the clients to cross the bridge and get on the TikTok side of things. And definitely will be one of the topics we'll cover today, but very excited to have a discussion about community and everything content and TikTok as part of that bigger ecosystem as well.
Awesome.
And hi, my name is Izzy, and I am a growth strategist here at NoGood. As Marina mentioned, the partner in crime from the paid perspective. So I work with our growth squads on numerous channels beyond TikTok, but have really led the charge on exploring what paid looks like on that channel and how that plays into community as well.
Well, I think we all know why we're here. I think there's a much larger shift happening in the advertising marketing space that is new, but it's not really new. It's something that should have been a given all along, but a lot of external circumstances are pushing in that direction. And that's the value of community, whatever background you're from, whatever business model you're from, whatever vertical you're from. So Dulma, I'm very curious to get your thoughts on how has that playbook sort of evolved over the past few years? Why specifically now more brands are turning towards it? And just in general, maybe also demystify the word community, because I think it's definitely become a buzzword that people throw around a lot recently. So just, tackling that from all the sides.
Yeah, so I think community is gaining more importance for a number of reasons. One is it's just so competitive. So in order to really stand out, you need to cultivate deep brand loyalty. And that is synonymous with community, really. So when you build those relationships, that's based on a two-way dialogue instead of just talking at brands and pushing products on them, then you get to enjoy the benefits of greater loyalty, which means higher LTV, right? It has real business implications. It helps you drive more revenue over the long term and more retention. So there's that. It's just more competitive. So that's how you stand out. The other thing is, as typical sort of ad channels get more difficult to get some sort of an ROI from, it actually becomes much more important to focus on retention. And that is also intimately tied to community. And then the other thing is, I would say it sort of, the brands that stand out today are going to be the ones that stand for something bigger, that have more of an emotional resonance, especially in spaces like beauty, fashion, maybe items that are not necessarily a must-have, right? You don't need another lipstick to survive. But I mean, my wallet would beg to differ, apparently. But there are certain products that are less functional but are nice to have. But because it is harder to stand out, you need to build a stronger brand. And when you're able to do that, it's easier to build a sense of community and also vice versa. And so I think for a number of different reasons, we're just shifting from let's only focus on performance marketing. Let's just plow a bunch of dollars into these sort of more, transactional kind of channels. Instead, let's build relationships and trust that loyalty and that sense of, people rallying around a shared set of values will translate to sales as a byproduct of that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think it's something that we've noticed with our clients, and I'm sure Izzy has a lot of input on the paid side and how that ask from the from a clients coming through the door has changed, but from where we stand from the community side of things, has definitely been a big shift. And one, brands being more open in us educating them in terms of what really means to foster a community, whether that's through a content strategy, whether that's through a platform where you accumulate all these people together and do community management in a more traditional sense. Brands are really, really turning towards that. And maybe not, recession has contributed to that. And that shift from we need to acquire really quickly to wait, we actually need to hold on to what we have and foster those relationships. And maybe in a different universe, had this economic situation hadn't happened, it would have evolved at a slower rate. But I think brands are starting to understand that your typical ad content, clickbaity, quick bottom funnel actions don't really drive the necessary results that they want anymore. And there's this larger shift towards content and authentic content and storytelling, which makes brands take a second and take a look at themselves and really think, but hey, what is the true value, the bigger value behind what we offer as a company, behind the product or the services that we offer, which makes it or breaks a company for sure. But we kind of nailed a term called performance branding in a sense where that's at the intersection of this really consistent brand strategy that provides a solid foundation for a paid performance strategy that amplifies it. So I completely agree with you, whether it's a larger economic circumstance or a more natural shift that happened over time. Things are definitely changing and new things are coming to the forefront in terms of what's important for brands to survive.
Mm-hmm. Great. And peppering in from the paid perspective, as we both have as everyone has already hinted at, we're having clients come in the door and say, used to say, I have $100 to spend on advertising. Now they have $5 and they need the same results. And so I think we're in a very difficult but exciting position where, we want to use community as that true top and even middle of funnel growth lever to not only build that follower count on TikTok, is just a number. It's basically you could pay for followers, but the actual comments, the engagement, the people coming back and wanting more, that is where the real heart of it is. And it's been really fun to explore, what content will resonate best with this very niche group of people. And actually putting conversions in the background, even though that's our ultimate goal. And, you're always trying to, you do have that goal, but approaching it from a different lens.
Yeah.
Do you have any specific sort of tactics or series of steps or maybe guidelines that you recommend brands to follow when they set off on this journey of transitioning towards building a community and fostering community and sort of tackling this big concept in a more step-by-step manner?
Yeah. I have been spending a lot of time actually the last few days thinking about this. But what I would say is there are a set of tools that are encompassed in this big fluffy term of community, and which ones you draw on as a brand will depend on the brand, the products, what stage you're at, what resources you have, right? Like it's going to depend on a lot of things, but just to throw some things out there. I mean, first, you need to define sort of what community means to you as a brand. Is that just a general feeling of there's some kind of cohesion in your customer base that makes them feel like they're part of something bigger? Because that can legitimately be what you mean when you say community. Or is it an actual literal community? Some brands have literal communities on Geneva. They have a Slack room or a Discord or a Facebook group or something. So it can manifest as that. I would say that literal community, that virtual literal community, is more sort of one of the manifestations of this broader sense of community. But that's something you can certainly do, especially if you're pre-launch. I really like the strategy for brands that are on a budget, maybe bootstrapped, of bringing together a few people into a room and just providing a lot of value in that community, whether it's about skincare or sustainability or mental health, and then building that loyalty and that credibility over time. And then they can be the ones who help co-create the brand and, get involved in the product development process with you. And then once you do launch, you can kind of carry that over and do every aspect and still continue to maintain that feedback and that dialogue. So I think a literal community can be great, but let's say you don't even do that. I think it's just about what is your brand? Are you really clear on your brand foundations? Are you really clear on what you stand for that goes beyond your products, right? Mad Happy is a great example of a brand that stands for mental health, but it's fashion and apparel, and their products are good, but it's not that different from other sort of like apparel items you might be able to find elsewhere. But because they have such a solid brand and such a clear understanding of who they are in the world, that ends up creating a sense of community, and then they sort of crystallize that with interviews, with a podcast, with their sort of like other kind of like media arm, basically. So I think when it comes to tactics, I would say figure out what resources you have and how you want community to manifest for you. Is it that you're building an audience through regular high value content? Maybe you do have a podcast. Maybe you have, like a guest speaker series, or maybe you have something else that starts to build an audience that is recurring where they can all rally around something shared. Or is it that you have a lot of sort of like pop-ups and activations that bring together local community? It can look like a lot of different things, but I think the most important thing is you need to be clear on who your brand, like who you are as a brand, and what you are, what is the through line between the people who are part of your community, because you also want them to have relationships with each other. So what do they have in common with each other? And then how can you activate that with events, virtual community content, and different kinds of, like content strategies.
Exactly, because at the end of the day, it's all about relationship building instead of just getting a number, achieving a sales number, achieving a, quote number of this is how large our community is. And I think it really offers a different and fun approach to how we view social proof. When we speak about authenticity, and influencers and any sort of affiliates, it can become muddled. Like it can be difficult to find a true recommendation from friends or from someone you don't know but be able to trust it. And the relationship building piece, I think, is really just built on substance, longevity, a solid brand, as we were speaking about, just a brand that knows its mission, vision, values, and always ties whatever they're doing back to those core values as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. And first of all, understanding what that community means for you. And I think for a lot of brands who don't want to immediately dive into having that hub of people, whether it's a Facebook group or a Geneva or a Slack or whatever that is, I know that takes resources and that takes a lot of dedication to moderate and maintain. It's pick your own poison, right? Start with maybe one channel or one format of a content and then elaborate from there and grow from there. And when you have a strategy in place, that sort of helps you create this valuable content. And once you go through experimentation, which we can talk about a little bit later, and nail down what exact value people recognize in you as a brand, evolve beyond that. Start with a TikTok, understand which value that you offer, which knowledge that you offer, which tips and tricks that you offer, which for hair care, it could be anything from styling with our product or, using it in your shower or using it at your wheel while you're driving and it's a red traffic light, something very small, and extend beyond that into a newsletter. And then maybe beyond that, a Geneva or a Slack community. I think having that laddered strategy and understanding that it's not about trying everything all at once in the very beginning, but starting with small steps and really understanding why people would choose you over another brand and what is that unique addition to people that you can provide that they would really go and run along with and spread the word with word of mouth and actually become part of your loyal champions. I think that's very important. And one thing that we like in community too, and this is also another term that's definitely been thrown a lot around, is a growth loop, which is basically like a flywheel of something, like a resource that works for you without you adding additional resources to it. Community is one of those manifestations for you as a flywheel resource that just works for you, because the amount of work you put in sort of operates on its own. Whether you create a product that's very high quality and people continuously refer other people or talk about you or really advocate for you, that's one way of doing that. And it all goes back to a strong brand foundation. It all goes down to having a mission behind your brand and a message or a set of values or principles that your community or your loyal followers and your advocates agree on and agree upon and resonate with, so that consistent brand strategy that will come through that one channel you pick and evolve beyond that with multiple channels is very important. Sort of a quick plug, which I think is a hot debated topic recently in light of a lot of brands in this space popping up, are celebrity brands or brands that are backed by a big figure in a specific space. I'm curious to get your take on this subset of brands that sort of evolve and build off of someone's persona, and what your take is on the longevity of them and what makes those successful.
Yeah. I think there aren't that many celebrity brands or influencer brands that manage to be a success because a lot of them really don't devote enough time to creating something that can stand on its own. I think these days, because that space of celebrity and influencer brands is so saturated, that in order for you to stand out in the beginning these days, let alone have longevity and consistent growth, you need to create something that even if you completely took away that famous face, it would stand on its own. It has good product. People like it. People come back, right? Okay, let's say you add in a famous face, but then, people might buy it initially for the hype. You might get that initial sort of like spike in revenue, but are they coming back? Because the sustained growth of a consumer brand is based on retention, right? If you don't have retention, you're going to really struggle uphill. And so I think it needs to have good product that needs to exist, is doing something interesting. Sometimes people say like, well, I tried their products and they're not that bad. It's not just a cash grab because the products are good. Yeah, but are they different? Is it just that they're a derivative of existing brands, but they're not bad, cheap quality? That's still not sufficient. So it does need to be filling a gap in the market. I think Rare Beauty by Selena Gomez is a good example. I think Fenty is a very popular example. I think Skims is a great example. I think these are really good examples of brands that happen to have layered on an incredibly famous person, which really helps with distribution and awareness. But even if you took that away, they would still be solid on their own. So I think that's first and foremost. And then the other thing that celebrity and influencer brands have going against them, actually, I think it's increasingly a disadvantage in some ways. Which might be a controversial statement, is people need to feel like it's not a crash grab and like it's authentic. So even if you are doing it because you're trying to diversify your own career and your wealth creation as talent, you need to have there be something about that brand that feels authentic to you. Otherwise, people are going to be skeptical and kind of frustrated because they're sick of seeing cash grab brands in the market, right? Because they don't want to feel like you're just shilling product that feels like merch, like glorified merch, instead of something that actually serves them. And so I think that is working against a lot of celebrities who decide to launch brands. People are going to be really skeptical about, is this authentic? Does it make sense why this person is launching skincare or why this person is doing tequila? Versus if you are not well known at all, if you're just a regular person, you don't actually have that working against you. Nobody's going to say like, is this authentic? Because they don't know you, right? The product just needs to deliver. The brand story just needs to be resonant. And so that's an interesting challenge that they have, where there are some examples of celebrities who have launched brands that seemingly like are in categories that came out of nowhere and they do well. But even then, I think there actually is authenticity. I think Bays by Shea Mitchell is a good example of a luggage brand by a celebrity that people didn't really see coming, but they love that brand. I mean, people love their Bays work totes. So that's kind of an outlier, but again, that reinforces the idea that authenticity is really important when it comes to celebrity brands. And you have so many incentives to not be authentic, because often the celebrity, whether they're a musician or an actress or whatever, they have a lot of things going on. They're not able to be that involved. Sometimes they don't want to be that involved. They just want somebody to make them the next Rihanna. They don't realize how much work goes into it. They want to do the fun parts of branding and marketing and not really building an actual organization, which is the not sexy part, but it's the essential part. And so, and also some kind of incubator is involved and they're also working on a million other brands. You have a lot going against you. People think it's this quick sort of like, get rich quick scheme, but it's really not. And it's increasingly not, because there are so many other celebrity brands you have to compete with.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's another manifestation of this change that we've seen over time, because I think that the challenges of succeeding as a celebrity brand nowadays are harsher than they were maybe in 2015 and 2016, where there's probably a wider plethora of these brands popping around, partially because advertising brand growth was seen as big of an acquisition play. So slapping a celebrity name over a brand was a quick way of getting traffic through the door and making sure that the initial subset of products was sold. But it's interesting how celebrity brands evolved with the larger market and industry shift. And now as also marketers, but also regular brands that are not necessarily tied to a celebrity name as they step into this new arena that is forcing them to drive with more authenticity, taking a hard look at themselves, focusing on the consumer, bringing the consumer back into the spotlight. The same thing happens to celebrity brands. And I do hear you that it is a double-edged sword where you would assume on a high level, on a superficial level, that celebrity exposure is a driving force behind a brand. Really, the way you should think about the celebrity is just another channel. Like you said, it's just a distribution mechanism. And even in the digital advertising space, it's very much thinking of how you can leverage it as a messaging mechanism or a positioning mechanism, but something that probably operates more on the top of funnel level, but doesn't carry the person through the funnel to actual final actions or long-term LTV and retention at the end. So yeah, I feel like on the paid side, there's a lot more to explore. So Izzy, I feel like there's so many insights, especially you have direct experience with this too.
Exactly. We've covered a lot, but one thing I will say is celebrity brands and how they approach community, I think is a really difficult thing to nail. How do you build a community of people just in general, and get, that social proof, get that product validation and get that feedback on, do people like this or not? If you're setting out to make a product, like you said, Dulma, you want that product to be the best of its kind. You want to be the best in the game. And if it's another, skincare product that is fine, what's the point? And then when you're building that for a celebrity brand, if ideally you would have that celebrity or that influencer be involved in that community and have them be an active member. But that's not always the case because it's the hard work. So then, zooming back out, making sure that the brand has its own personality, that it has its own legs to stand on, beyond just that face, I think is really important. And consumers will call you out on it, especially on TikTok. Comments can get savage. If there's a bad review about your product, it's 100% going viral, and it's hard to come back from that. So I think celebrity brands in general, if I were a celebrity, I probably wouldn't even invest in it because there's just so many holes to poke into it. Also, just on the paid side, looking at it from just a brand perspective, we see this a lot in beauty, which is already an oversaturated market in general, especially on TikTok with the amount of UGC and just authentic content we see. And breaking into, quote, that non-brand space for such a concentrated market is going to be really hard. And I've seen a lot of brands fall into, that fake success. We're getting a lot of traction this week from our trademark campaigns and from, the celebrity's name. When you take away that volume, there's nothing to support that house. So it has to really be approached with just a very specific lens.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's a really good segue into the platform you already dropped, which is TikTok, obviously, and how it definitely has created this double-edged sword situation for brands where it requires presence, but also requires some openness and vulnerability, which is where it can work against celebrity brands. If there's something wrong or the product quality is not there is a minor mishap or a major mishap, definitely the power is in the hand of the consumer to call you out and to bring you down, unfortunately. So it definitely takes some extra thought. But TikTok has definitely become a bigger part of a lot of brand strategy as they move towards diversification. And as Dulma, you mentioned, no one is putting all their ad spend or all their effort, all their eggs into the Facebook ads bucket. No longer that's the case. But I also think there's been this craze, like there is around a lot of platforms that are hot in a given moment of, we just need to be on TikTok, or we just need to be on Be Real, or we just need to be on IG Candid, which is apparently a thing that's being tested right now as a response to Be Real. So whatever that is, what are your thoughts in brands adopting TikTok as part of this community effort? And what are some pitfalls they might fall into if they follow the too trendy, I guess, route?
Yeah, well, I think you're kind of hinting at it, which is that you can't just chase shiny objects, right? There's always going to be a new platform. There's always going to be like, I mean, Clubhouse was a thing and now nobody goes on it, or Be Real is the new thing, but who knows if it's going to be around next year. TikTok, I think, has staying power. I think it's at this point a really major platform and it's going to be around for a while and it's a heavy hitter. But even with TikTok, you want to be intentional about the strategy you use. You want to be thoughtful about how your TikTok strategy is an extension of your content strategy, your brand strategy, how it makes sense for you, how you can figure out a way to do it in a sustainable way for your team, especially if you are strapped for resources. So you want to be intentional and strategic about that kind of thing instead of just rushing to the next shiny new object. At the same time, I understand brands not wanting to fall behind and wanting to capitalize on this sort of like window of arbitrage opportunity that can open up when there is a hot new platform and it's not yet saturated. So I think it's a balance between, all right, how do we stay open-minded to the new platforms that emerge so we're not just kind of left behind, but also how do we approach them with selectivity, knowing that there's always going to be a hot new thing. And I think really when it comes down to where brands need to be focusing right now, allocate maybe some time experimenting with the Be Reals of the world, but I think that should be sort of like don't try to incorporate it as a major channel or a major strategy into your overall strategy. Just allocate some time or budget to experimenting with things on a yearly basis, depending on what comes up, but know that your main platforms need to be your main platforms and you can't spread yourself thin. You're going to get much further if you really have a thoughtful strategy doubling down on your key platforms as far as content goes, than spreading yourself too thin, throwing way too many things at the wall. So it is a balance. As far as TikTok, I do think it is a major platform, but when it comes to, how to approach it, I think the best brands, the brands that perform well on TikTok, approach it as if they are just another participant in the community and they happen to be a brand selling product. You're participating in, the trends, if that makes sense for you. You're embracing the fact that it is an entertainment platform. You're being funny, you're being raw, you're being unpolished in the way that makes sense for TikTok natively. You're just another participant and you happen to be a brand versus you're trying to take a really polished strategy and sort of like lay it over TikTok, which doesn't really work and people can smell it and it's kind of a turnoff.
Completely agree with what you were saying. Going back to the point just before, speaking about just like an experimental budget, we always recommend macro experiments from a channel perspective. And a year ago, TikTok was that experimental channel. Now it's really fun to see how that's becoming a larger part of the marketing mix. But then also looking at zooming out, if a brand is sort of slapping on, as exactly what you're saying, they're trying TikTok, but they're not really adapting. Kind of zooming out and looking at a high level, what are the learnings? If it's a content issue, let's address it. If it's a targeting issue, let's address it. Are people even on the platform? Most likely, yes. There's as you mentioned, engagement. People want to be entertained. There's a reason that, average screen time on TikTok is over an hour for majority of the billions of users. Maybe it's only millions, but still very high number. And what I think is a challenge is that communication piece to a client of, you have to let go of those strict brand guidelines. We have to be playful. We have to be a member of this larger community, or else it's, we're going to waste a lot of time and money in the process. That's just my small caveat on the side.
Yeah, I agree. And to the point about sort of like brands being afraid of being more vulnerable or having like a sort of oops moment of something, some kind of negative review goes viral. It is a double-edged sword because yes, you have that risk, but you have to embrace that risk because there's also the other side of TikTok where, hashtag TikTok made me buy it. If you get the right influencers to talk about your brand, or if you have a video that takes off, that can do so much for you. So you kind of just have to embrace it as, all right, how do we minimize that downside risk? But also how do we just embrace the fact that it is a very unpredictable platform and that can actually work in our favor. And if something goes wrong, I mean, people have short attention spans anyway. So don't be too afraid of it. Don't be so afraid of it that you're afraid to even get started on TikTok, or you're trying to control things way too much. Or when you do influencer partnerships, you're being really heavy-handed about the script that you're forcing them to use, because that just doesn't work.
Yeah, that's a really interesting piece that we've been exploring with clients. We've seen a lot of brands bring on either in-house content creators, or we have, our community team that is acting as an in-house creator for a brand. And, when you set off on this journey, it's obvious to think, oh, we'll do a script. Obviously, we're going to give you like exactly what you need to say. And it just always comes out being too over manufactured. And it's a bad egg. Everybody can see it. And, we've evolved our process to now, we have our content buckets. Our content themes have never changed, but we give less direction and more talking points, while also not wanting to stifle that creator, whether it's someone who works with us at our company or if it's an external person as well. It also applies to any brand partnerships, this as a creator yourself. So also curious to hear any thoughts that you have in terms of that working relationship with brands and, maybe like a more positive experience. I loved when they did this, or, this really turned me off and the content maybe didn't perform as well.
Yeah, I think what brands need to understand is that the creators that you're working with, ideally, I find more often than not, they want the partnership to succeed. They're not just here to collect that check and post the content and then they're done. They really want it to perform well, especially on TikTok, where it can be so unpredictable. I don't know if other creators are like this, but I have personally so much probably unnecessary anxiety about whether a brand partnership piece of content is going to perform, because I really want it to do well, because I want to make it worth their while. I feel grateful for the opportunity. I want it to potentially turn into a longer term partnership, because that is much more advantageous to me as a creator, right? If I'm saying yes to a brand, I already think that they're great and I'm already willing to create many pieces of content for them. So I want it to work. And so they have to trust that I want it to work. And therefore, what my creative ideas are kind of designed to bridge that gap between what they have to offer, their unique value proposition, and what my audience is going to resonate with. And a lot of that knowledge of sort of like not only what works on TikTok, but what my audience is going to find authentic and believable coming from me, because they're used to my style. They're used to my voice, right? People, like, I think when I started on TikTok, I thought TikTok just shows your video to all kinds of random people all the time. You don't get to build a community. I've learned that that's very false. I have my regulars. I have my super fans. I recognize their names. We have conversations in the comments, even though TikTok is decoupled from the social graph. And so I'm so invested in creating content that works for the brand, but also works for my audience. So they have to trust that. And give me the script, provide me with the education, tell me what's special about your brand, but then trust me to create something that works. Because I find that even when they say, all right, we're going to give you freedom, but can you give us like the exact script? I can try to kind of theoretically come up with the script, but in the moment, it always changes. You know what I mean? Like I can't always predict like how I want to say something. And so it just helps to maybe like really get on the same page about what's special about the brand. What are the big no's in terms of what language we don't want, right? Like, of course, like those guidelines make sense. But at the same time, let's get on the same page about the concepts. And then in terms of how it's executed, have more of that creative freedom. Because I've even toyed around with, I've had brand partnerships where we have like certain concepts and scripts that we develop together, and then I post them and they do okay, hit or miss. But then as sort of like a little bonus or a thank you, I'll throw in an extra video that like we didn't really talk about that I know abides by their guidelines. And that just kind of is an inspired piece, and it'll perform so much better because I wasn't, so anxious about, oh my gosh, like I have to make this so buttoned up. And so I think that, yeah, so it's just, it comes down to like working with talent, right? You have to know how to work with talent. You have to trust that it's a very specific, weird skill set that is kind of hard to really like control too much. So I think brands need to get really clear on what their like overall guidelines are for like what they absolutely want the videos to be about and what they don't want mentioned, but then otherwise give a lot of creative freedom.
Exactly, because that second type of content that you make on a whim, or you're following those guidelines, but it always feels like it's a bit rushed and it feels fun and kind of dangerous in a way because it's not what was buttoned up. And then you post it, it performs, you post it on other platforms like Instagram, Facebook, whatever, even YouTube Shorts, and it continually performs because it has that authenticity element. People can see that there's something genuine there.
Exactly. I'll just add in one more thing. I really think TikTok responds to energy. Like if you have enthusiasm and if you're in like a creative flow, people can feel that. They almost don't really care what you're talking about. They just like feel kind of hypnotized by that energy that you bring to the video. And that's what you want to engineer for. And if you're going through 1,000 rounds of revisions, you kind of kill that creative spark.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the very big thing that as I'm observing you both talk about this is something that a lot of people believe in that's not necessarily true. It's the fact that TikTok as a platform has changed, because when it first started, everyone's impression of it was, oh, well, Gen Z dancing or just doing dances or doing parodies or just doing lip syncing. And while to an untrained eye, it might seem like, yes, it went from this immature little platform that kids play around with to this platform where we can now advertise on and be our brand selves on. That's actually not true, because the DNA of the platform has remained the same. And in fact, it's been one of the ushers of this larger change towards the content that performs nowadays, which is organic, unpolished, authentic, equalizing, making sure that everyone can be a creator and everyone can have the creative freedom to showcase a message or a brand or anything of the sort in their own delivery and manner and sort. And it's the engagement, it's the fun, it's the fact that brands think that everything presence wise or touch point wise needs to be the serious thing. Everything needs to be thought through to the detail and manufactured and polished, but it's actually not true. And the essence of the platform has remained the same. It's just another echo of this larger change that we're observing in the entire marketing and advertising and space. And truthfully, what it is brands adapting and not TikTok changing as a platform. It's brands being more open, albeit maybe a little more slower, and we're getting there for sure, but adapting to this. Yes, we have to put the guardrails down. It's okay to follow a trend or use a little swear word here or have our intern do a lip sync and think of the platform a little more differently and inject that authenticity back into the content. And the same pertains obviously to working with creators. I think the creator economy is another major product of this authentic shift. And before, brands would work with designers and still are obviously working with designers and videographers. And that was the creative medium that would translate a brand message or essence into a piece of visual or production that would translate the message. But now it's the creators. It's the creators who have the creative director cap on and guiding the creators in terms of the brands in terms of how to plug into communities and how to speak to people and how to effectively convey the message in such a manner that's relatable, that's authentic, that comes from someone who already has a community that trusts in that persona and believes what they say. So that's one. And one last thing I wanted to add on this topic is that larger consumer response to the type of content that performs and works right now. I don't want to use the word performs because it's just not authentic, I guess, but that works and wins nowadays is reflecting on the algorithms as well. And the algorithms across all these platforms, TikTok being one of them. And no matter what that platform is, whether it's Instagram Reels or now also Facebook Reels and YouTube Shorts and Spotlight on Snapchat, apparently, which is also a thing now. And they're more and more designed to push the right type of story, the authentic type of story at the most relevant time to the most relevant person. So it's almost lacking that understanding how the times currently work when some of the paid strategies try to override that. And Izzy, I feel like you're best to speak to this, but what we've found is the symbiotic relationship between paid and organic, but driven by the idea that at the end of the day, it's about making sure that the right message through the right delivery at the right time meets the right person instead of manufacturing all of that very much for acquisition purposes. So yeah, I'm sure you have something to add too, but that was something that I felt was very much built on what you guys were having a discussion about.
For sure. I'm thinking of one client in particular in the crypto space, which who knew that there's a huge community on TikTok? Well, there is. And, diving into how to talk to cypherpunks, there are really particular group of people. They spot authenticity much quicker and better than any of us, not saying we're not crypto nerds as well, but to the normal eye. And there is this just next level authenticity that you have to unlock. And to do that from a paid perspective is incredibly difficult. You have to have the jargon, you have to have some sort of social proof, you basically have to be so entrenched in that community because you have to be an actual member of that community versus I think what other brands and clients might do is say, do their research, think that they're, fitting in, but they're really not. Just like approaching it from an organic and paid perspective, you have to have that true engagement on organic content. You might not have the views, but if you have 10 comments that are really meaningful, then that is the ideal piece of content to spark. And that's the direction that you should be going in.
Yeah, I like that distinction between quality and quantity.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed. So I know we talked about TikTok a lot. I'm sure a lot of people are wondering how to actually get started on TikTok, both from a creator perspective and from a brand perspective. I feel like those first steps in establishing yourself on TikTok may seem a little scary and too steep for people to take. So Dulma would love to sort of compare notes on what your guidelines and your suggestions are on getting started with TikTok. And then we can compare it to what Izzy and I have been practicing with our clients as well.
Yeah. So I would say get clear on the value you want to provide. Do you want to provide entertainment? Do you want to share education? Do you want to share more sort of cinematic, aesthetic kind of visuals? Whatever you want to provide, get clear on that. That has to make sense with, your brand, your products, your brand strategy, et cetera. And then once you do that, I would come up with sort of like what your themes or your content pillars should be. And then within each of those, maybe you pick like 3 to 5 or something. And then within each of those, I would brainstorm just a bunch of ideas. And then I would carve out time to maybe batch create content, maybe create content every day, but you need to be posting at least once a day. I would say 3 times a day, ideally, every single day for I started posting every day, at least once a day for 100 days in a row. And that's what it took for me to kickstart my journey on TikTok. You don't quite have to do that. It is a big commitment, but something like you're going to get you're going to get out what you put in. You cannot engineer virality. If people knew how to do that, that would be great, but you can't. And really sort of like the nature of TikTok is, I think, intentionally gamified such that you cannot necessarily predict what's going to go viral. And so you just have to, the best way to go viral is to post more and post good content. And the more you post, you're going to increase your chances of going viral. So that's just how you're going to grow. So the more consistent you are, the better. And then I would just kind of use the initial conversations and the comments that you have to inspire other posts. I would look at similar accounts to yours that are in your space, look at their comments, see what questions people are asking, what requests people are making. That can be a good way to kind of, get inspiration for ideas. And then I don't know, other than be consistent and add value, and don't worry too much about going viral, but then still learn study the things that work, right? But at the same time, you can't really engineer it. So I would just lean more into how can I add a bunch of value and how can I post enough so that I'm increasing my chances of using this as a growth channel.
Yeah, that's almost exactly as what we do, or whatever code it is that we've cracked internally. It's very, very similar. And it basically means that a brand has to really understand what those values are that they're trying to deliver. So what is that unique offering that people will come to you for, whether it's a slew of products or some features within your product, whatever that is, understanding the exact positioning, your value, the offering that will shine in the eyes of the consumer, and then categorizing those across content buckets. So is it educational content that you want to deliver? Is it product highlights that you want to experiment with? Is it some more trendy reactive content that you want to experiment with? And then within each of these bigger categories, and we like calling them as macro themes. So basically like your positioning that ties into your brand pillars type of thematic connection. Within each, just experimenting with some more micro instances. So it can be the delivery, the length of the video, the text overlay. And this way you continue with experimentation on two planes. One helps you position yourself on TikTok and understand what is that niche, because you have to be niche on TikTok. You have to be known for something on TikTok that people come to you for. And on the other hand, you also sort of hone in your tone, your editing style, those minor details that bring joy to people and really truly define you and make you recognizable on the platform, which is unlike a larger branding, positioning, product market fit strategy that would happen on any other platform. But one thing I like saying is that TikTok is a long game, but quick learnings, which is a beautiful combination of things. But as you said, it does come with a caveat of no, you're not going to see a skyrocketing growth or skyrocketing virality in the first 30 days. You need to be consistent. There is resources you need to allocate to be able to produce the amount of content that is required to satisfy that. And having that sober, consistent understanding that there's a lot of competition and content on the platform, and the only way to break through is the combination of quality and quantity. And I know quality and quantity are usually sort of like a payoff structure where quantity might suffer if you go for quality, or quality might suffer if you go for quantity. But with short form video, because the execution bar is low, and it's easy to put a video out, something as simple as a trend could still resonate if you structure it and strategize around it really well, and the essence is still value, and vice versa. So I think TikTok makes it easy to make sure you satisfy a high bar for both. But yeah, I think being patient with the platform is very important. I think also making sure that learning from other platforms, I like how you pointed out, looking at competitors, looking at questions, feedback from the community. I think the same way, thinking a little more macro, and if a brand comes through the door, the first thing we ask is, how are you doing on other platforms? What has worked on other platforms? Where did you start on other platforms? And platforms, I mean, doesn't necessarily have to be a social platform. It can also be their website on the landing page. How do you frame yourself on your landing page? How do you frame yourself on each of the pages within your website? Other social channels internally, how do you speak to your employees internally? Because TikTok has that whole other corner for corporate culture and the faces behind the camera type as well. So this 360-degree view of yourself and iteration, experimentation, and patience have been sort of our formulas to success on TikTok.
Yeah. I would add a few more things. I like all of that, and I agree with all of it completely. I would say, like, if you're new to TikTok, which at this point I think a lot of people have been on it, but still I get a lot of friends saying like, I really want to watch your videos, but I refuse to download TikTok. And I'm like, it'll be a matter of time. But spend time on the platform, because then you're going to understand there are these little nuances to what really works on TikTok that you can only understand if you spend time on the platform. And it's not going to be that hard. Once you go down the rabbit hole, you're going to keep scrolling. So just spend a lot of time, and also observe other maybe similar brands or other just brands in your vertical, whether it's B2B or B2C or whatever, and just study. And you're going to start to absorb this kind of idea of what really works. For example, I would say, yes, there are a lot of content strategies that are transferable from platform to platform, but on TikTok, there are certain things that do work. You know, having a consistent human face to humanize the brand, that works. Behind the scenes content, kind of like showing videos of like you packing up, you know, your sweatpants or whatever you sell, like that somehow works a lot. And so, or sharing like, this is why I started the brand, that works. So there are things that work even better on TikTok. Get an idea of what those are, spend time. The other thing is, I would think about TikTok in phases. I would think about the phase one as you're trying to experiment. You're coming up with those macro themes and those micro experiments, and you're experimenting, throwing things at the wall, finding your groove, finding your style, right? You want to kind of like converge on a style and then relatively kind of like stick to it, because people like to feel like they know, you know, as soon as your video comes up on the For You page, they want to be able to like identify exactly who it is. And so you're going to experiment. And then phase two is, once you get a few of those hits, those viral videos, you want to double down on them and just grow. And then phase three is, I would think about your content as not just everything is meant to go viral, but you have the stuff that's supposed to be the top of funnel, but then you also create content for your community, for your diehards, for the people who already know you. That stuff can be a couple thousand views instead of tens of thousands. It doesn't matter, but that is meant to take those people who already know you and love you and deepen your relationship with them. So I think because when you look at a TikTok page, all of the videos look alike and you can't really develop a visual hierarchy. So it's tempting to think every piece of content just needs to go viral, but actually you need to mentally categorize each video into different buckets. What is the intention behind this video? Is it, trying to be more top of funnel, be more of a brand awareness play, be more kind of fun and short and catchy? Or is it trying to really take the people who already know the stuff that I talk about and build a deeper relationship with them? So I think these frameworks kind of emerge as you experience TikTok, but it's not obvious to people getting started on TikTok. So I think like they would have helped me when I started out. So hopefully that helps.
For sure. And also just peppering in some paid insights. One thing we always like to remind clients is that you can't get immediate results from the paid side. Like as Marina mentioned, it's quick learnings, but it's a long game. The pixel is not as advanced as other social platforms or ad platforms in general. So it just takes a bit longer. And what I actually find interesting is that learnings from the paid perspective don't actually translate as well from an audience perspective or just from a targeting perspective to TikTok, because there's such a large percentage of people on TikTok that you can't find in other platforms, whether that be social or whatnot. So I also think there has to be a level of just a high level of experimentation in terms of your audiences, again, with the content, and then even the different creators and just themes that you're trying to, put against each other. It's silly to think that you can, duplicate your strategy from another channel and make it work on TikTok from just an ads perspective. It won't work.
What's interesting though, that the opposite is actually proving for us true though. Taking insights from TikTok and applying them to other channels have been more successful than the opposite way. And I think, on the paid side is you definitely have a lot more to answer in this case, but I can attest on the organic side and the community side, TikTok has become this pace setter where you can start experimenting on TikTok and truly evolve your omni-channel strategy from a short form video perspective into this little mega strategy, because a lot of the trends, a lot of the conversations, a lot of the cultural instances happen on TikTok, and the other platforms currently follow suit. So we've seen a lot of success in repurposing content from TikTok to Reels and to YouTube Shorts. And granted, you have to take that with a grain of salt and still continue experimentation on those platforms as well, because the audiences do look different and they are differently aged and they come from different backgrounds. Like Izzy said, there's not a one-to-one comparison. However, because largely the conversation and the cultural trends and the conversations happen on TikTok, that strategy gives a good starting point for short form video experimentation across multiple channels. And something that you said that really resonated with me is that not every piece on TikTok is meant to go viral. You have to be strategic with what's community engagement, what's reach, what's interaction with the people you're in conversation with, and what's bringing new people in. We find that the same works for Reels as well, where you kind of leverage the videos as a reach mechanism, but you still kind of stay true to some of the more carousel or static or meme posts that are meant for the eyes of the people who are already following you, who've already bought into following you and are part of your loyal community and are your advocates. So that idea of a two-pronged strategy of reach combined with retention, I guess it is acquisition and retention, something we've been talking about since the beginning, is still present here as well. And TikTok is definitely setting the pace for other platforms in that sense. Well, I think one big elephant in the room sort of conversation is the types of brands on TikTok and the misconception or belief that most successful brands on TikTok are just D2C brands. We ourselves have a lot of B2B clients and SaaS clients. So I'm curious to get your perspective on the so perceived more difficult verticals on TikTok.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great question because it's something I preach a lot, which is it's not just for B2C. In fact, B2B brands, especially if you're targeting kind of like the SMB market, though I'm sure there's a way to make it work somehow creatively for the enterprise market. I'm not sure. But from my own personal experience, I know that you can be more B2B and gain traction on TikTok because I target a lot of entrepreneurs and operators and investors, and I get a lot of inbound for brand consultations or what have you. And so I think these days, just we're just going to see more and more people go on TikTok and be active on TikTok as it loses this sort of reputation as being a Gen Z platform for dancing or for trends. It's going to start to become kind of the universal platform. It's going to, be have elements of Google. People are conducting a lot of search on TikTok. It's going to have elements of LinkedIn. I mean, people are starting to use it, to kind of promote themselves as candidates for recruiting purposes. And Instagram and YouTube. So there are all these elements of different platforms that are kind of forming a mega platform with TikTok, as I like to say. And so I do think that more people are going to be joining. The demographics are going to mature. It's going to become more diverse. We're going to start to see an explosion of different kinds of content that are way beyond what the reputation used to be 2 years ago. And as that happens, there's just more of an opportunity for brands to take whatever their content strategies are. If you're a B2B brand, you probably are doing some kind of content marketing, some kind of thought leadership. You probably have case studies and white papers and a blog, right? And so just take that and then figure out how to translate that in a way that works for TikTok. It's always worth experimenting. And I really do think that that is going to start to become more of the MO for B2B SaaS startups. I mean, the fact that I even do, I almost exclusively do brand partnerships with B2B SaaS companies. And so the fact that I do that and I am able to have those partnerships means that there is an audience for it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the biggest experiment for us was our own TikTok channel, which technically is B2B because we're an agency. So that was definitely one interesting experiment that's still continuing. So stay tuned for sure. But I agree with you that I think that value-driven mindset on TikTok is very important. And again, it equalizes D2C to B2B to SaaS, whatever that is, because truly, if you're leading with educating people, that's very important. And I'm with you on that. Maybe for enterprise, it's a little early, but some smaller businesses or medium-sized businesses are definitely here to stay on the platforms because there's a lot of education happening for people who lead the company, who people are within the company. And let's not forget that companies are just they're accumulations of people and individuals within them. And one thing that worked for us is making sure that our faces are front and center and that human aspect of our company is coming through. So combining that education with also some cultural moments that happen in the office, whether we're having pizza once a week or we're just filming what the culture is like on a day-to-day basis, making sure that that aspect humanizes you too, because one thing that is interesting we notice is there's two audiences that follow you from a B2B perspective. It's people who might want to be working with you or at your company or part of your culture, and people who want to hire you or work with you from a B2B perspective. So that's helped for us to understand where we stand with the audience that comes in. We have people asking, are you hiring? What are the internship opportunities? What are full-time opportunities? And we certainly have clients who said, well, your TikTok is hilarious. Can you do the same for us? So I think an interesting thing, maybe it's in a way, as you said, like LinkedIn, where there too, you are keeping an eye out for the VCs, for the growth leads, for investments, but on the other hand, you're also fishing for the best of the best in terms of candidates as well. So on the sales side, definitely it's going to be big, but there's also the flip side of you'll also get to attract amazing talent because they like you and they follow you and they've learned from you and they sort of put you on a pedestal as a brand. And you're kind of this aspirational place they want to be in terms of their career. But yeah, definitely hear you. Izzy, do you have anything else to add?
One thing I find really interesting is that people, including myself, will say, I watched a video, not mentioning it's TikTok, but saying, I watched a video and I learned this. Because, and there's a bit of a shame in saying, oh, I learned this on TikTok, but it's not, it's just a new form of YouTube for me. Like, I love long form content, but to get digestible facts and stories and just things that I can go out and share with people in such a short format, I think it was really catering to the society where we are in society of just attention spans and how busy we are. And I don't think it'll be long before myself included will not have as much shame from saying, I was watching a TikTok and I learned this. And I think that's just a really cool product of B2B on the app.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. I think that's all sort of questions and topics we had in mind to cover today. So again, thank you so much for joining us for such an amazing conversation. And I hope to see you on other platforms and cross paths. And when you're in New York, please come stop by.
I will let you guys know.